Hi, everyone. This is your host, Raven Syad, and welcome back to Forgotten Echoes, a podcast where we dive into the mysterious and unexplained cases of Black women that often get lost in time. Today, we're diving into the chilling case of Kanika Powell, a woman whose death left us completely puzzled. Despite her promising career, her ambition, and her dedication to her country, Kanika was murdered in cold blood. 15 years later, her case remains unsolved. We'll explore her life, her mysterious murder, the strange occurrences leading up to it, and the theories that have emerged since that fateful day in August of 2008. As we dive deeper, we'll also shine a light on the unanswered questions that continue to haunt her family, friends, and the public. This is Forgotten Echoes, Episode 3, The Murder of Kanika Powell. Sources for today's episode include traceevidence.com, Discover Hub pages, True Crime News, A Killer in the Shadows, The Murder of Kanika Powell, Black Girl Gone, a true crime podcast, Crime Lines podcast, Official Unsolved Mysteries, and True Crime Daily. Now let's get into today's episode. Our story begins in Prince George's County, or PG County, Maryland, where 28-year-old Kanika Powell was living her best life. Born on January 31st, 1980, Kanika grew up in a close-knit family. Her mother, Judy Powell Forrest, recalls Kanika as a spirited, feisty, fun, and ambitious child. And if that's not the best way to describe a child, I don't know what is. Kanika wasn't like the other kids. She had a determination that set her apart. After graduating from Largo High School in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, Kanika decided to enlist in the U.S. Army, a complete surprise to her family and friends. Kanika's family doesn't know what made her so determined to join the military, but her strong desire became reality in 2000, where she served overseas in Korea. Throughout her service, Kanika maintained close ties with her family and her hometown friends. In 2004, Kanika left the military and returned home to Prince George's County, Maryland. Not long after moving back home, she landed a contract position with the Johns Hopkins University's Applied Physics Laboratory in Laurel, Maryland. Kanika's job at the laboratory involved security work related to national security projects. She worked as a contractor, but just after a few months, she was brought on as a full-time employee, immediately earning the respect of her colleagues. The exact details of her work were kept private, but what we do know is her work at the lab was of critical importance. I mean, at just 28 years old, Kanika was crushing it, but she wasn't one to boast about it. She was humble. We also know that she had top security clearance, and much of her work remained a mystery, even to her closest friends and family. Her mother, Judy Forrest, recalls how Kanika would occasionally leave town for work, picking up supplies or materials for her lab, but she would never say exactly what she was doing. When asked, Kanika would always reply, quote, "Mom, you know I can't tell you that," quote. Now, despite the secrecy surrounding her work, Kanika lived a relatively quiet life. She was unmarried, no boyfriend, no children, and had a close circle of friends from high school that she remained in touch with. But it was in the summer of 2008 that things began to take a dark turn. Kanika's life, which had been full of promise, would be cut short in a tragic and mysterious way. On Saturday evening, August 23rd, Kanika called her mother Judy. The words Judy heard that night would haunt her forever. Quote, "It was a Saturday evening. I'll never forget it," says Judy Forrest. She called and said, "Ma, these two men just knocked on the door saying that they were from the FBI. She said they called her by name. She said, "I've already called the FBI to find out if they had sent anyone, and they didn't." And she said they showed her a fake badge. I guess she could tell that it was a fake from the peephole. She didn't open the door, Forrest continues. She called the police. They searched the area. They didn't find anyone. Of course. Quote, according to her mother, the visit left Kanika feeling uneasy. She took the necessary steps to protect herself, contacting the authorities and alerting her friends and family about the strange encounter. In an email to her loved ones, Kanika recounted the events in detail, urging them to be cautious. The email states, quote, I just wanted to share with you the scariest thing that happened to me this weekend. Saturday evening, around 7 p.m., a man was knocking at my door, and as all of you know, I live alone. I asked who it was, and he didn't answer. So once I got close to the door and looked out of the peephole, I saw a male figure that was not familiar to me at all. I asked who he was, and all he stated was that he was from the FBI and that he was looking for Kanika Powell. It freaked me out completely because this man knew my name. He held a shield up, but no picture ID, and he never gave his name. He told me he was looking for me in regards to an investigation. I told him that I had no idea as to what he was talking about and that he would need to show me documentation as well as a warrant of some sort. So he left, and I looked out my bedroom window and saw him walking. I also heard a voice tell him to walk in the opposite direction. The whole situation was scary and seemed so false. So because of this incident, not only did I get no sleep for the rest of the weekend, but I'm now trying to get an alarm system installed in my apartment. Quote, and then adding a final warning stating, pass this on, ladies. Who knows who these guys are and what they're doing? Kanika also thought a second man was there as she heard someone say, go the opposite way, after the unknown assailant flashed his ID. But that wasn't the end of the strange visits to Kanika's door. Now, just adding my commentary here, I think it's so terrifying that it's just a normal evening for her, and she's like, who is that at my door? And she doesn't recognize who this person is. She calls to confirm with the FBI that they sent someone, and they verify that they did not send anyone. How scary is that? And I'm just thinking about Kanika. She's 28. She's living alone. She's single. It's in the night, and this guy is clearly trying to get her to open the door and knows her by name. It's not like he's trying to get someone to open a door for whatever the reason is. He specifically asked for her name, which is super scary. That alone is so terrifying to me. I also want to just recognize Kanika for how much of a badass she was in this situation, because not only did she immediately call her mom about the situation, she did all the proactive steps. She got it in writing, sending an email out to friends and family, recalling the situation, the time and day, what she saw. She's got a paper trail. She calls the authorities immediately. They come out, they don't find anyone, but nonetheless, it's documented. You know what I mean? She verifies and follows up with the FBI that, are asking, did they actually send somebody, which they didn't. But the fact that she immediately calls to verify is incredible in its own, because I think a lot of people would be like, oh, they're asking for me. This is strange. This is weird. If it happens again, I'll say something. But she took immediate action. So just for that, I'm like, what a badass, Kanika. That was, amazing. And I don't think a lot of people would have reacted so quickly in a similar situation. Also want to mention, at the time of her death, we don't really know much about the physical appearance of the assailant. It's very vague in the email she sends to family and friends stating that it was a male figure, but that's pretty much all we know. Just want to throw it out that later in the episode, we will get into a little bit more of it. But at the moment, immediately after this happens, we don't really know how, the person or the man looked in the peephole. So 4 days later, on August 27th, another man came knocking. This time, the man claimed to have a package for Kanika. Kanika didn't let him in, and when he left to retrieve the package, he never returned. And that's not all. There was yet another strange visitor. Yes, if you're counting correctly, a third knock on her door. Just hours later, at 7:30 a.m. on August 28th, the very next day. This time, the man claimed again to have a package for her. Kanika, already on edge from the previous encounters, was super confused. Judy, Kanika's mother, in an interview said, quote, "She called me early, 7 or 7:30 in the morning, and she said, 'Somebody knocked on my door again saying they had a package for me,'" Judy recalls. She said, "It's 7:30 in the morning. Who delivers a package this early?" Quote. She also expressed her confusion over the visits. She didn't know why these men were bothering her, and she began to wonder if she had somehow angered someone. She didn't seem overly frightened, but Judy could hear the concern in her voice. Kanika decided to skip work that day, opting to run errands and get her car serviced instead. She told her mother she wanted to take care of things during the day, just to be safe. Judy couldn't imagine that would be the last time she spoke with her daughter. Now, just kind of going over the last minute or so of me talking, this is her third knock on her door by some unknown assailant that has nothing that she doesn't recognize, and the package that they're trying to deliver to her, she also doesn't recognize. I think it's really important. At the beginning, I was hearing this and I was like, why is it so unbelievable that somebody would try to be sending you something at 7:30 in the morning? Also remembering it's 2008 and there was no overnight 2-day Amazon delivery, and you didn't pay an extra $15, to get things delivered overnight. So, if something was getting delivered to you at 7:30 in the morning, let alone that early, which wasn't common back then, which is insane because that was 15 years ago and I've aged myself, you knew what you were waiting for, because chances are you were waiting for a while, unless you had, more means to get things faster, which means more money or whatever the case is. But majority of people were not getting things overnighted, and they didn't lose track of what was being delivered to them and what wasn't. So that's something, just fruit for thought, because I just didn't think about it. And I was like, she was so shocked that she was getting something delivered at that time, which that makes it all the more eerie. They literally go to her house the night before, try and deliver a package, never come back with the actual package. Hours later, the following morning, they try again at 7 to 7:30 in the morning to get her to sign for this package now. It's just really insane and really speaks on the fact that this person or persons were trying to get her to open that door. They were fake FBI agent. They said they had a package and, they wanted her to take a look at something. Then they're saying, "Hey, we have the package now. Can you sign for it?" And they're quoting her or asking for her by name. It's just really, really scary. Now, later that day, just before noon, after running her errands, Kanika was returning home when tragedy struck. She was ambushed by an assailant who had been waiting for her just inside the doorway to her apartment. The gunman opened fire, shooting Kanika 4 or 5 times. She was found unconscious outside of her apartment, and emergency responders rushed her to a nearby hospital, but it was too late. Kanika Powell succumbed to her injuries and was pronounced dead the following day, August 29th, just days after those ominous knockings at her door started. Now, I am very impressed that the neighbors called the police really fast in this case. It was so fast that they had mentioned to investigators that after coming out their apartments, they could still smell gunpowder in the air. The only thing that's really odd with this is that, was the assailant that fast? It's 2008. We don't know if there's any surveillance cameras, and I don't know if there was or wasn't. I would assume around that time, more than likely there wasn't, but also just because we, the public, don't know doesn't necessarily mean it didn't happen. It could be police are holding it close to the chest at the moment because it still is an ongoing investigation. But I just think it's really interesting that, they looked out, they came out of their apartment so fast that they smell gunpowder, but they don't see anybody. No one sees someone running away. No one's seen someone fleeing the apartments or, just nothing. No going down the elevator or running downstairs. That's the part that's really mind-boggling to me, is just no one saw anything. And police came fairly quickly. They came within minutes. And the fact that she was shot 4 or 5 times and they still were able to get her to a nearby hospital unconscious, but still alive, speaks to kind of how fast they showed up. And we know nothing. And I think that's the part that's just really kind of crazy to me. Kanika's murder baffled investigators from the start. There was no sign of forced entry, and her wallet and keys were found near her body, ruling out robbery as a motive. Kanika had no boyfriend, no known enemies, and there were no signs of gang activity or personal vendettas. Detectives began to dig into her life, looking for answers. They noted that Kanika had no criminal history and had always been a stand-up citizen. She was a respected security contractor, a U.S. Army veteran, and someone who had worked on sensitive national security projects at the Johns Hopkins lab. But still, no one could explain why she was killed. The mysterious circumstances surrounding Kanika's death led to a number of theories, to say the least. Some people speculated that her work might have been a factor, that perhaps her murder was related to her involvement with highly classified projects. Maybe she found out something that she wasn't supposed to? But when investigators looked into her job, they found no direct link between her work and the murder. Even her coworkers were shocked, and none of the theories seemed to make any sense. Her mother urged the police to dig deeper, stating, quote, "She was just living a normal life. It doesn't add up. Somebody knows something and they're holding on to it, and we don't know why." Quote. As investigators searched for clues, more unsettling questions arose. Who were these strange men who had knocked on Kanika's door in the days leading up to her murder? Why had they targeted her? Was it a case of mistaken identity, or was she being specifically stalked? Was she being set up for something much darker? How did they know her name when they approached the door? Adding to the mystery is a series of eerie details that were found after Kanika's death. Police believe the gunman had been lying in wait inside of her apartment complex. Kanika was shot just before noon, and neighbors reported hearing the gunshots shortly after the attack. But the most unsettling detail, Kanika wasn't even supposed to be home that day. She had planned to go to work, but chose to run errands and get her car serviced instead. So how did the killer know she would be home? The fact that they were waiting for her in her doorway, and obviously we know that they had tried to get into her home 3 times, 6 days leading up to her murder, is so eerie. They waited in her doorway. And why? Why was she being stalked? It doesn't make sense. The fact that this person either was stalking her, they must have waited for her to leave her house to go run errands. Were they stalking her the entire day? Because she was supposed to be at work. It was a work day. And she had decided last minute she was going to do errands to get them done during the day because she felt unsafe. So they must have been, one, stalking her throughout the day to know, hey, she didn't go to work. She's going here. We're going to stalk her all the way until she gets home. But it's also a little weird because they were waiting for her when she came up to her apartment. So that leads me to maybe thinking it's theory number 2, that there was an inside man. Maybe she mentioned this to somebody without even thinking about it. Hey, I'm not going to be in today. I'm actually going to go get my car serviced. I'll be home around noon. You know what I mean? Something like that, because they were waiting for her. Even the theory of stalking her throughout the day, they would be coming home with her. So all of it is just really strange. Or they were waiting by her door the entire day. And that seems a little unlikely, just because I feel like somebody would take notice that, hey, there's this guy around, her house the entire day, or somebody that we don't know or doesn't live here, or whatever the case is. All in all, very eerie, but definitely puts a different spin to the theories. Now, after her death, a second theory began to emerge. In 2008, just 3 months after Kanika's murder, a man named Sean Green was also murdered in the area, well, around 45 minutes away. He was also shot to death, and he was working in the security field. He also seemingly lived a very low-maintenance life. Was his death connected to Kanika's? Could these murders have been the work of someone targeting people involved in sensitive government projects? No solid connection between their deaths was ever made, and as we know it, police have ruled it out. Another theory investigators began to look into was the possibility of a serial killer operating in the region at the time. Jason Thomas Scott, known as the mother-daughter killer, was a convicted murderer with a strange connection to Kanika's death. Scott had worked for UPS and used his job to find victims. His murders followed a chilling pattern. Most of his victims were mothers and daughters, and all of Black descent. Was Kanika's murder part of this pattern? I encourage you to take a deeper look into Sean Green's case and the mother-daughter serial killer, and let me know what you think about these theories in the comments. However, even after all the theories and speculation, Kanika's murder remains unsolved. Law enforcement continues to struggle to make sense of the events surrounding her death. As investigators looked into Kanika's background and pieced together the timeline leading up to her death, the questions only multiplied. Kanika's mother believes there is more to her daughter's death than anyone is willing to admit. Police have never shared a specific theory on her murder, but they are still investigating. However, in 2023, Unsolved Mysteries released an article that gave more insight to the case. Here are some of the main points. So the summer of 2008, Kanika was hanging out with a new group of friends. And while it was previously stated that she had no angry exes or boyfriend, that turned out to be not the entire truth. Kanika was bisexual, and one of the newer people she was hanging out with that summer was her girlfriend, Melissa. Her mother did confirm that she was in fact bisexual, and while it wasn't a secret, she wasn't exactly shouting it from the rooftops. Her mother did meet Melissa a couple times and described her as, quote, warm and had no red flags, quote. However, after Kanika was shot, her core friends mentioned that none of the new group she was hanging out with that summer came to the hospital, and they don't recall them even being at the funeral. Was the murderer connected to this group? Another bit of evidence was descriptions of the assailants that came to Kanika's door over a span of 6 days. The first person to knock on her door, or the fake FBI agent, was, quote, a black male with a black hat, black North Face jacket, and black framed glasses, quote. And I just like to throw out the point, a jacket in August in Maryland. Can we get any more suspicious? Like, if I had to think of a costume at like Party City or something for a fake FBI agent, that would be it. Now, the second person, or the fake FedEx delivery man, said they had a package for Kanika. He was a 6-foot-tall black man. He was wearing a FedEx uniform shirt, Timberland boots, and shorts. But there was no FedEx truck parked in front of the apartments or in sight. And FedEx confirmed they had no signed delivery under Kanika's name. Another point that we learned of was Kanika came home from work to black-and-mild cigarette butts near her front door days leading up to her murder, which was odd because it indicated maybe somebody was waiting for her in front of her house, and for a while at that. And the last point was her mom and friends pushed for her to stay with them or to just go somewhere safe. But she refused because her and her girlfriend Melissa were driving to ATL for a Pride event August 29th, the day after she was murdered. And that's where the updates end. Now, to wrap up the new updates we learned, I have a couple questions. One, did we ever test the cigarette butts for DNA? And I mean, this is assuming that Kanika bagged them, took them to the lab to even be tested. I only asked because I just am curious, and Kanika was so proactive in, I mean, the entire case. All the evidence, or the very little evidence we do have, comes from Kanika. So I'm just thinking, and just because we don't know doesn't mean it didn't happen. But did it ever happen? Did she ever get those bagged and tested? Because it seemed like from the Unsolved Mysteries interview or article, this might have happened a couple times leading up to her murder. My second question was her new group of friends ever questioned? I'm sure they were, but I mean, I'm really just thinking about the fact that things started taking a turn for the worse for Kanika the summer she was murdered. I mean, that same summer. She was already a top, secret clearance employee prior to this summer. So, in a sense, that kind of knocks the theory out that all of a sudden somebody wants her murdered because of something connected to her job, unless something had come up that we don't know about. And that's a possibility. But I do think it's really strange that she starts hanging out with these new group of friends the same summer she's murdered. They're nowhere to be found. They don't come visit her at the hospital. They don't come to her funeral. And it's not 100% clear, but I also never saw any conflicting statements. But I believe this might even include Melissa. I'm not sure. They just say she was part of the group of friends, but they don't specifically say Melissa never came to the hospital or funeral. But if that's true, that's even more suspicious. I don't know. Something about it just doesn't feel right. My third question, was it 3 different men or 1 man in disguise? I don't think we ever get clarity on that. So we find out the description of the 3 men, but the only overlapping physical attribute is the fact that they are tall Black men. Now, is it hard to fake, a beard or get fake glasses or different costumes, the fake FedEx shirt or the North Face jacket? It's not. And there's only so much Kanika realistically could have seen out of a peephole. Mind you, she never came in contact with him until the day she was murdered. Before that, she had only spoken to the person through a peephole. So, I mean, these descriptions are from her point of view, which can be kind of skewed, or it just doesn't give a lot of room for her to really pay attention to the small features or to be able to see, is this a fake beard or whatever the case is. So we don't really know if it's 3 different people or 1 person. I myself have the theory that I do believe it might have been 1 person in disguise. However, we don't know for sure if that's the case or not. And my last question is, was it 3 knocks on her door or 2? And I say this because you'll see different reports. At least while I was doing research for this episode, I found different reports on both sides. They were conflicting. So I think everybody or all reports can come to the same conclusion that the first knock happened, the fake FBI agent. Now, where it gets a little weird is people can either separate the second and third knock on the door. So the second one happens the night of the 27th. So that evening is when she's approached by a fake FedEx worker. They say they have a package for her. Kanika notices that they don't actually physically have the package. They say they're going to go get it in the truck. They never come back. Then hours later, that following morning, the day that she was murdered, 7:30 in the morning, they come back with the package and ask for her signature. So that's one theory. I see in other reports that they kind of mesh those last two together and just speak on the morning that she was murdered. So that 7:30 in the morning visit from this fake FedEx person saying that she needs to sign for a package definitely happened because she called her mother right after, and her mother references that call quite a bit. So that's my last question. Just if I get clarity on it, from what I've read and what I've gathered, there were in fact 3 different visits to her door by this unknown assailant. But I wish we would just get a little bit more clarity on that from the Prince George County Police Department. Fast forward to 2025, and we haven't received any further updates on her case. Kanika Powell was a loved daughter, a skilled professional, and a woman full of potential. Her death shocked her family, friends, and colleagues. And as the years have passed, her case has remained a tragic mystery. Now here's the call to action. If you or anyone you know has information about the murder of Kanika Powell, please contact the Prince George's County Police Department at area code 301-352-1200 or the Crime Solvers hotline at area code 866-411-TIPS. A reward of up to $25,000 is being offered for any information leading to an arrest. Kanika was a bright woman who had the whole world in front of her. Her family deserves justice. She deserves justice. Thank you for tuning in to episode 3 of Forgotten Echoes. Please do me a favor and show your support by following the podcast and liking, subscribing, and sharing this episode. I'm Raven Syed, and I'll see you next week with another case that needs to be remembered. Stay vigilant, stay aware, and keep the echoes of the forgotten alive. I'll see you soon.